What is the worst thing that has happened at a high school reunion party that you attended? My sister, my husband, and I were all in the same graduating class, plus my husband's best friend. The best friend's name is something like John Smith, very common. He was very popular in high school. Super nice guy, stood out in a crowd. If you didn't know him, you certainly knew of him, even in a massive school. So anyway, the 20-year reunion rolls around. My sister is the only one who wanted to go. She called right after, very upset. There was a huge memorial wall for John Smith, who had just died. None of us knew. Awful. My husband was like, huh, but we just saw him. Called him up and was like, hey dude, are you dead? No, not dead. Surprised, but not dead. Anyway, it turned out the much less popular another John Smith was the one who died. They made a lovely memorial for the wrong guy who was forgotten totally. We still run into people to this day who see him and are like, hey, aren't you supposed to be dead? This is actually horribly sad for the guy that actually died. Still freaking hysterical though. Some girl confessed to cheating on her high school sweetheart, thinking enough time had passed it wouldn't bother him. She thought wrong. Someone I knew from high school tried to arrange an unofficial reunion as the school wasn't going to do one. He was socially inept and would say or do odd things which people picked up on a lot. But his heart was always in the right place. He went to a lot of effort, but very few people responded at all. Those that did mostly made snide comments about the event behind their back, like dissing the location. Some made fun of him too, as he was doing something admittedly odd at organizing. Then, close to the event, he cancels and blows up, sending everyone a justified message about how they can all go suck eggs, and he was just trying to do something nice and wanted to catch up with people. That was received with more snide remarks too. He died unexpectedly just a few months later. One guy had made not one but two fortunes and had a net worth of well over $100 million by our 20th reunion. He'd already retired. On our classmate update bulletin, he listed his occupation as unemployed and unemployable, as a bit of a gag. Some of the well-meaning but clueless types sought him out to offer encouragement and tips on how to find work. I've met two billionaires through work. One does work, and the other happily, oh so happily, lives the life most of us only dream of. He's a super nice guy and mentioned he might go back to work after his kids are grown. He says he's lucky enough to be home with them. My 10-year reunion killed itself before it happened. Turns out our class president took a hard turn into a footloose character after high school. Highlights of her event planning include no alcohol allowed, not even BYOB. A few classmates in a reasonably successful band offered to play for free. She was adamant there would be no music or dancing. Plus, ones were supposed to be spouses only. Two guys happily told her they'd bring their husbands, and she kicked them both from the Facebook page. The venue was the high school soccer field in Iowa, in August. We were welcome to bring our own chairs. A few people offered to bring beanbags and bocce and similar games. She said no because it would make the reunion too much like tailgating. Suggested entertainment was a guided tour of the school, which had undergone zero change since we graduated. Catering was from Hy-Vee, which is a grocery store. The food is actually okay, but the tickets were $60. It was ultimately cancelled because out of our class of 300, less than 10 people bought tickets. Yeah, that's a good lesson in who had authority. You can just, instead, talk to everyone else and agree to meet separately. Authoritarianism. She wanted to tell other people what they could or could not do at the expense of the group. I hope she doesn't have kids. Didn't happen to me, but I had this friend who got someone pregnant back in the day and she kept the kid. They've both been great about it. He helps financially, but that was the extent of his contribution. She married soon out of high school and met a great guy who's been the de facto dad. Either way, it's a bring your kids day, and someone slipped in that kid's real dad. And the kid heard it, and it was a freaking crap show. Everyone was trying to figure out who said that and how could someone spill that secret, etc. At least the kid has two loving parents. That's the most important thing. It wasn't really bad, just odd. A guy came with full Kiss-style makeup on, white face, black shapes around his eyes, and black lips. We were too awkward and polite to mention it, so everyone just chatted with him as though it was completely normal to turn up like that. Is it possible that he just did it as a private joke? The idea is to remain straight-faced and watch people squirm. Or was he just a really big Kiss fan? I'd hope so, because that's freaking funny. Someone told me, "You're not a failure, be yourself." And so, when I went and proudly told them what I was doing these days, they all pitied me, and one dude tried to give me money. It made me feel bad about my current progress. I hate people. The biggest thing I've learned is to never compare yourself to other people. I was an A and B student in high school, and I had very good grades in college. But I'm currently working in a grocery store, making $14.50 an hour. I would have never thought that I would be working in a grocery store post-college, but here I am. Not so much at, but before. 10-year reunion from a large school. The plan was for the reunion to take place over Thanksgiving weekend. To help pay for the expense, raffle tickets were sent out to the entire class to sell. The reunion didn't happen. What were they going to do that couldn't be handled by just asking each attendee to pay $20 to $50? At my 25th reunion, people complained about having to pay $40. When someone suggested that they would be willing to throw a couple bucks towards anyone not being able to afford the fee, it became a crap show of privilege versus I'm not taking your charity. It's been a decade since I finished school. I see an old classmate sometimes when he does maintenance work in my apartment block. About a year ago, he asked if I was going to the reunion organized by some of our classmates. I said no because I couldn't think of anything worse and also hadn't been invited. When I next saw him 6 months later, I asked how the reunion was, and he exasperatedly explained that it had been a real crap show. The mean girls had started planning it together, fell out, and then started each planning their own. So there were about 4 crappy, tiny, awkward parties, and everyone was confused. This sounds like it should have been a TLC show where the judges vote on whose party was the best. And the winner gets to go on a date with a former quarterback star who picks them up on his old motorcycle. At my 10-year reunion, the organizers were doing the thing where they give awards for the person who came the farthest to attend, the person with the most kids, etc. The award came up for who had the oldest kid, and people started shouting their kids' ages. When it quietened down, the shy girl near the front said in a normal voice, 11. And then we all realized why we had stopped seeing Heather right before graduation. The Heather from my graduating class got pregnant in 8th grade. None of us believed her. It was really awkward when she had her baby. It happened to a classmate of mine when we were 13. This was in a really freaking crappy place and no one seemed to bat an eye. I moved there the year she got pregnant, so I was a new kid. I had a bit of mental moment when I was like, wait, she's pregnant? I knew that was freaked up and I didn't understand why there wasn't anyone saying anything. The people who were supposed to plan our high school reunion dropped the ball, so I figured it wouldn't happen. But then this other dude from our high school stepped up to plan it. He was in a graduate program and also working part-time at a banquet hall, and he had said that his boss would give us the banquet hall space for free. It was a really nice gesture, and he seemed really into it. He had been miserable in high school, grumpy, sullen, unpleasant, mean to other people. He came out in college, so maybe the weight of having to keep it a secret was part of why he was so unpleasant. Maybe he'd be more fun now. I was working a crap job and had no savings at the time, so I was neither interested in having my former classmates pity me, nor was I gunning to shell out a lot of money to attend. Plus, my crappy ex might be there and that didn't feel worth it. The organizer made a Facebook event and asked people to Venmo him the cost of admission prior to attending. He wanted something like $15 to $20 per head. I can't remember. Anyway, it didn't really feel worth paying for. Maybe if there had been some drinks included or something, I would go for an hour. I sent him a private message asking what the admissions ticket covered. Food? Drinks? The space was free after all. He posted publicly on the Facebook page that if the cost of admission was too steep, message me and we can work out some financial aid. What? I then publicly posted asking what the admission cost covered. No response. Other people asked too. He said it would go towards having a bartender and server dedicated to the event space as well as towards food. Okay, fair. Folks, he was the server. My friend showed up having not yet paid him and he barred her entry. The people who had paid the admission cost showed up to an empty banquet hall, were given a menu by their former classmate and told to order their own food and drink from him. He pocketed the admission ticket money as his fee. After an hour, he brought out one grocery store sheet cake for 75 people to share. That was it. We'd been there less than an hour, having a great time reconnecting. Suddenly, an old friend approached and said, "Is that your wife over there? She's pretty hammered." And as we watched, she tripped and fell face first, full body crash onto a 12-top table where many of my old classmates were sitting. The table broke, food and drinks flew everywhere. I walked over, scooped her up, and half carried, half walked her out the door. She took Xanax before going and was an alcoholic who started slamming drinks as soon as she got there, so good times. I didn't go to my 10-year, but my entire friend group did, and they all called me asking where I was. While I was on the phone with one of them, he goes, "Oh crap, Brittany's here." Brittany was a train wreck in high school and apparently hadn't changed in 10 years. She proceeded to get trashed, get in a fight with a waitress, and did meth in the bathroom. Police picked her up that night after she was found passed out in McDonald's bathroom. The high school I went to had a really big gang problem. A great many people didn't attend due to being in prison. Some of those who were in gangs in high school had worked their way through the ranks. One in particular was pretty high up. He decided to show up. It was generally peaceful until somebody decided to stick him with a knife. Then all hell broke loose. The dude that got shanked was a colossal butt to me through all of high school, and now he's bleeding profusely from multiple stab wounds. Being an off-duty medic, I did what I have to do, half expecting him to bleed out on the gym floor. He didn't remember me. There wasn't that movie moment between us. I doubt he even recognized me. I just kept plugging holes and thinking I shouldn't have worn my nice shoes. Cops and EMS arrived. Few people got arrested. He survived. I ended up tossing my favorite dress shoes and a really nice pair of pants because they were too blood-soaked to rescue. At the after party, the one guy getting drunk enough to think it was a great time to discuss race relations with one of our black classmates. Well, not so much discussion as randomly imposed the topic. The cringe nearly killed us all. On my 5-year reunion, after some sort of discussion, got his paycheck out and got loud saying, "Now do you think I'm a loser? Don't believe how much I make? Check this out." Of course, he just made things worse, and everyone was laughing at him. I mean, he had his paycheck on him? I haven't seen him since. Jesus, I mean, he could have at least done the more subtle douchebag thing like wear a giant luxury watch or show up in an exotic car, both of which could just be rented. Small college reunion with my core group of friends from university. This was about 5 years after graduation. We all partied pretty hard in school but mellowed out in our late 20s. Everyone decided to meet up for dinner at a local bar or restaurant. Think Applebee's but nicer. One guy showed up already wasted, with a duffel bag full of multiple packets of weed and a bottle he started on before meeting us. He decided we were boring, finished his bottle in the restroom, and refused to come out. He ended up passing out there. The bartender kicked him out. He came alone in an Uber, and we had no idea where he lived. None of us wanted to take him home to our places, so we dropped him off at his last known address, his parents' house. Both of them answered the door, and we handed him over. It was past midnight and incredibly awkward. He's not invited to the next reunion. My husband invited the entire party to our home. The reunion was being held at a place, built to hold parties. Well, the majority of the people that were invited came, so we had 100 crammed into a 2,500 square foot house, and a bunch of them decided to jump into our pool, which was ice cold. I was not pleased with my husband. At my 10-year high school reunion, we had a decent turnout, maybe 100 people. We were at a pretty nice hotel banquet hall. There was one guy I had known all through high school, and he was a well-known stoner. I'll call him Chris for this story. I see Chris walk into the banquet hall, stop in his tracks, turn around in a very slow 360-degree circle, surveying the entire room. He just says, "Whoa," and looks visibly alarmed. He stops and his eyes settle on me. I say, "Hey Chris, long time no see, man." He kind of slides over to me and whispers in my ear, "This is really weird. I'm pretty sure I know every single person in this room." And that is when I realize he's wearing the same clothes as the banquet hall workers. Oh my god. Chris is working as a server at his own high school reunion and has no clue what is happening. I walk him out to the front lobby and explain it's our 10-year high school reunion. He is mortified, beyond embarrassed. He was never contacted and didn't even realize it had been 10 years since we graduated. He just knew he was working another catering gig in a never-ending series of catering gigs. I make him take me to his manager. I explain what is happening and tell the manager there is no way this guy is working his own high school reunion. Awesomely, the manager agrees. We find a different suit jacket and tie for him, and I take Chris back to the party. He ended up having a good night. This guy slammed some warm Natty Light during beer pong, then held his wrist up to his mouth as if it were coming back up, and then he projectile vomited. The best part is that all of it somehow shot forcefully from his fingers like Spider-Man, and we webbed everyone on the side of the room with vomit. It was full of cooked onions. It was amazing. Someone confessed to me that I was his dream girl, with his fiancée as his date to the reunion. I barely knew the guy in high school. Unfortunately for his fiancée, she didn't know anyone there and he refused to leave with her. He drunkenly said, "I'm not leaving with her, I'm leaving with you," to me. I told her to text me when their car was outside. Then I whispered, "Let's go," in his ear, walked him out and put him in the car. I'll never forget the look on his face when he realized who was driving, and I said, "Yeah, that's how tonight is going to end." When I was in 7th grade, this rich snob bully, John, grabbed off my head a wool scarf my mother had knitted for me. He threw the scarf into a pile of muddy leaves and jumped up and down on it. When I went home that day, my mother was furious when she saw the torn, muddy scarf. She made me tell her who did it. Then she called the school principal and yelled at him. The next day, John got pulled into the principal's office and paddled. And that was back when they still paddled kids. 55 years later, at our 50th class reunion, John came up to me and angrily said, "You got me into trouble in 7th grade." I got him in trouble? And he's still mad about it 55 years later? I said, "John, you were a dick in high school and you're still a dick." And I walked away. No one came. I went to my 10-year. It was admittedly a really freaking small town, so my class was only 27 people. But only 4 people showed up and 1 was actually homeschooled. It kind of sucked. I was looking forward to seeing people and traveled from a long way away. It's kind of jaded me towards my classmates. I'm not angry or anything, just a realization that there really wasn't any connection that survived. Not high school, but one time I got invited to my college's alumni event. This was only a few years after I graduated, and I liked enough of my teachers to go see them. Anyway, we pull into the college and they have like 10 bouncy castles set up for the event. I'm still confused. What? Why? Everybody likes bouncy castles. About 13 or 14 years ago, when we were visiting colleges for my brother, we were walking across campus and saw a bouncy castle set up. We go past it and a full-grown adult man with no shoes excitedly asks us, "Is that jumping castle for big people too?" and sets off in a hurry towards it. I still think about it. Not mine, but my mother went back to her 40-year reunion last summer. In December, she left my father after 36 years of marriage for her high school sweetheart and is now living with him. We need details. How did it go down? Well, she left last December telling everyone in the family just a few weeks before. She's now quarantined with Loverboy out west. It does seem to be all old horny women. On a positive note, my dad is doing fine. He's quarantined with his new girlfriend. She's a woman he works with and has known for years. They've been close friends, and apparently now that they're allowed to be more, they've jumped on it. So really, both my parents have moved on from their 30-year marriage split pretty quick. My brother and I are still kind of figuring it out. Went to my partner's 5-year at the local Elks Lodge. He grew up in a really rich town, so it was super extravagant. The best part was the open bar until like 9 p.m. and then cash afterwards. We were all having a great time until some scumbag snuck into the basement and stole a bunch of booze. When the bartenders found out at 8:30, they were furious and kicked us all out. Ruined what would have been an excellent night. This one is kind of depressing. My 10-year high school reunion was of course organized by the popular kids. The girls that still lived in our small hometown and were past their peak. They are really rotten people. I was actually in the group until they started bullying me in middle school. By the time our reunion rolled around, I believe 4 of our graduating class has passed away. At one point they had us all sit down and they dimmed the lights for a slideshow that was in memorial for one of our lost classmates. The one they were, of course, good friends with. I was so furious I stormed out. Maybe because I was friends with another girl we lost. But how self-centered do you have to be to have a class reunion and at least not do some research and have a memorial for everyone gone? This was not my reunion, but my husband's. In high school, my husband was, and still is, a very reserved and quiet person. He tolerates no BS though. I call him John Wayne. He is also 6 years older than I am. We arrive at the venue and everyone is mingling. All of a sudden, a woman calls out my husband's name and runs over. He introduces me and she loses her ever-loving mind. Apparently, she had been in love with him since elementary school, but hadn't ever said anything, and she planned on asking him on a date that night. She has no idea he was married or that his wife was 7 months pregnant. She burst into tears and started yelling at me incoherently. Turns out she's living with bipolar disorder and was also an addict at the time, which is why she reacted that way. We still chose to leave less than 20 minutes of arriving though. I was at one not too long ago. We have a very small school, so a reunion meant a handful of high school classes getting together at the new building of our school. For a quick background, the principal at the time I was there was the daughter of the founder of the school, and her daughter worked as a teacher. Anyways, all 3 generations are standing 5 feet or so from my group, and we were actively making fun of the old principal for being racist, and I think we were loud enough to be heard. My evidence, she was constantly glaring at our group the entire rest of the night. Very awkward. We had a teacher in high school that told us, by the time you reach your 10-year reunion, at least one of your classmates will have died, during a discussion about mortality. 10-year reunion arrives and nobody from our class died. Saturday night of the reunion, we're partying and having a good old time. One of the organizers gets up to the microphone and is making some announcements. She gets a blank look on her face and drops to the floor. Brain aneurysm. She was dead before she hit the floor. Middle school, not high school. My friend and I went exploring the school. Went into the library, which was being renovated. Found an abandoned hallway, climbed a ladder to reach a hallway over the ceiling of the gym with a stairway leading somewhere that we didn't think was even part of the building. Opened the door to find asbestos. Just a freaking lot of asbestos. I don't even know what the room was. It just started falling like snow when we opened the door, and then my friend said, "Hey, there's a sign that says, 'Warning, asbestos.' Maybe this stuff is asbestos." And that's the story of how I got mesothelioma. I asked a classmate about her husband. She told me he can go freak himself. They just got divorced. I asked another classmate about his kids. His wife left him and took the kids unannounced. The special ed kids got drunk and 2 of them started a fight over a girl. My high school ex got drunk, pinned me against the wall, and jammed her tongue down my throat right in front of my wife and my classmate's husband. Maybe not the worst night of my life, but it was definitely interesting. The class officers did a 5-year reunion on Thanksgiving weekend at a local bar. They only invited who they had liked, around 30 to 40 people. One of the people they didn't invite had become a police officer who talked his supervisor into running a DUI checkpoint. Almost half of the people who went ended up going to jail that night. 2 of the organizers ended up with drug charges as well as DWIs. The 10 years started off better, but still ended up being a cluster freak. They decided to go with a picnic at the same place we had our senior picnic. One of the class officers had started a catering company and gave themselves the job. About 1/3 of the people ended up with food poisoning. Thankfully, COVID caused our 20-year to be cancelled. At our 5-year reunion, one dude had a threesome with my best friend and another girl. Hardly the worst thing, but he was in a relationship at the time and I had to hear about the details of it from my best friend. Apparently, his dick was much smaller than anticipated. Truly terrible. I didn't attend as I had moved far from my school, but in the process, I was emailing the organizer and wanted to get in touch with an old friend. Figured she could pass on my message. She had the misfortune of having to tell me he passed away at 30 from diabetes complications. A rough day, and I didn't even attend. I went to my reunion despite high school has been a crap storm for me. I was a self-conscious girl who was pretty jumpy when someone would talk to me. I've long grown out of that, so I figured why not go and see who I can talk to now. I spent the whole night talking with some people who I never talked with because of the whole high school clique thing. It was a great time, and then someone decided they were going to get blind drunk. He started a fight with another guy for no reason, and the two of them crashed into me and we all fell over into a table, breaking it in the process. I didn't break anything, thank God for being chubby. But I had some pretty intense bruising along my torso and hips. I also had a bruise going across my right cheekbone. The cops were called and the drunk dude got arrested. The guy he picked a fight with was taken in as well, although not under arrest, and I was sent to the hospital. I had to take time off work for a few days and learn how to apply concealer makeup since I worked in customer service then. The drunk guy's wife was nice enough to pay me back for my hospital bill though. Not me, but a former friend of mine. My wife and I went to her high school reunion at a brewery back in Michigan. The former friend of mine showed up after a bit. That friend happened to be in the same graduating class as my wife. I didn't attend the same school. Anyway, she gets there and I asked how she has been. Her response, really bad. She proceeds to tell me that she and her boyfriend split up, she has a crap low-paying job, and so on. Also, it doesn't help that she really doesn't get along with most of her old classmates that attended. The night goes on and everyone is catching up and having a good time. My former friend says goodbye and goes out to the parking lot to her car. She comes back in saying someone ran over her car. Everyone assumed she meant someone hit her car, like dented the bumper or something. Nope. Someone with a truck or SUV literally ran over her car, drove on top of it and took off. Sitting and having several beers and catching up with an old classmate on one night of the reunion. 1 month later, the news broke that the same person was arrested for luring a minor for sex. Turns out after they left the reunion that night, they went home and started chatting with the minor online. The minor was actually an undercover officer and had been having conversation with my classmate for a couple of weeks prior. This person had a family at home, ended up being sentenced to 5 years in prison. High school jock raped a girl while she was passed out in the bathroom in high school. 10 years later, he took her to the side at the reunion to tell her to stop telling people he raped her. I hope she then rented a billboard that said, "High school jock raped me." It was at a convention center and the college hockey game was next door. Once the game ended, some drunk guy came in and started eating scones and went to the bar and pounded about 5 free beers before security kicked him out. He stuffed scones in his pockets while being escorted to the door. I was never invited to my reunion, but hitting that reunion after the hockey game was awesome. I'll never forget the taste of those pocket scones.